Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we have a new video here on Wednesday. We have new videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here on the channel. Mondays are for poetry. But today's video is a writer's quote. This is the 23rd writer's quote, and this, just like the last quote in the series, comes to us from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. This comes to us from the chapter titled Maneuvering. I've invented a new maneuver. Not right now, Eddie Izzard. No, Eddie Izzard. That's just me. That's fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll go with it, you uncultured swine. The quote is the fifth bullet, and it reads as such: maneuvering with an army is advantageous. With an undisciplined multitude, most dangerous. Maneuvering with an army is advantageous. With an undisciplined multitude, most dangerous. Now, the quotes that I'm going to be bringing to this series from The Art of War, I'm going to be coming at these quotes. We're going to be breaking down these quotes from three different perspectives, because I think that those three different perspectives from which we might dissect these things could be advantageous in their own rights. The first being writer versus self, the second being writer versus craft, and the third being writer versus audience. Now, the first, writer versus self. How do we apply the quote, maneuvering with an army is advantageous, with an undisciplined multitude most dangerous? How do we apply that to the writer versus the self? Discipline is king. As Jocko Willink would say, discipline is freedom. Discipline is king. You have to, in order to, I think, consider yourself a writer, the number one thing you have to do is write. Perhaps there's nothing else you have to do. Do you have to publish to be a writer? No. Do you have to cash checks on your writing to be a writer? No. But you've got to write, otherwise you are not a writer. So in the battle of the writer versus the writer's self, traveling, maneuvering with an army is having a regimen. Not a regime. Not a regime. That bugs the high hell out of me when people say you have to have I'm starting a new writing regime. It's not what regime means. It's a regimen. You have to have a regimen in which to maneuver. You have to decide you're going to sit down and write. You have to have that discipline. An army is disciplined. That is the difference between traveling with an army versus the undisciplined multitude. Having an army means everything has a place and everything is in its place. Having that type of strategy as far as being a writer is concerned means, hey, it's Wednesday. I'm going to write because I write. I'm a writer. And it's Wednesday, and I write every Wednesday. And tomorrow's Thursday. On Thursday, I write. Because on Wednesday, an army is an army. On Thursday, an army is that army. But the undisciplined multitude, on Monday, Bob from the undisciplined multitude, he's a carpenter. On Tuesday, he does ego lifting at the gym, right? That's the difference. Another facet with which this might help us, if you know your story, have the discipline to know your story. Having that discipline to know you are a soldier in an army, having that discipline to know the marching orders, having that discipline to know the battle strategy, right? Having the battle strategy, sort of the same thing as knowing you've got a story to write. So you're walking around with this story in your head all day. I'm halfway through this short story that I've been writing. You get to digest that way back in the dark part of your skull. The dark part of your skull being a Bukowski quote from The Last Days of the Suicide Kid, I believe. But you get to have that story in the dark part of your skull all day, while this part of your skull is doing all the talky person stuff. The back part's sort of digesting it, and this sounds pretentious and douchey, but hey, we're here. Parts of that story will reveal themselves to you. That story will reveal itself to you the longer you carry it with you. You just have to be working on it. And having that discipline to sit down and know you're going to work on it allows your brain to digest different parts of that thing while you're not even consciously thinking about it. And what it does, look, having that discipline as a writer is what really defends you from the vagaries of life. Knowing that you're going to sit down and write. You're going to get that in. You're going to return to that story. This is something with which I am personally struggling at the moment. I have been struggling mightily with this because I will sit down and just distract myself. So those are, as far as I can tell, the three ways in which the writer versus himself. I'm a himself, so I'm going to be using that instead of his or herself just for convenience. The writer versus the craft. What does it mean to be an artist? An artist. God damn it, I screwed it up. What does it mean to be a soldier? What does it mean to be an army? There are things which, if you are a cannoneer, you're not really screwing around with your musket. I'm bad at this. If you are a pilot, what use have you for a shotgun, right? So part of the being an army, traveling with an army, maneuvering with an army as far as being a writer versus the craft is concerned, is having a little bit of knowledge of the craft, having a little bit of a handle, having some purchase on the parts of speech, having some purchase on the common parts of a story, on the common story arcs, on the stereotypical characters which we might employ. My heat's going off. I hope this doesn't get too bad. I forgot to turn it off before I press the record button. So, versus what that means to be maneuvering with the undisciplined multitude. Look, there's something to be said for just telling stories. There really is. Versus writing a story. However, they're not the same thing. They just aren't. And they never will be. There are going to be things which we can take advantage of on a page that we wouldn't be able to take advantage of when telling a story. There are going to be things which are advantageous to telling a story verbally that we can't take advantage of on the page. We can try, we can emulate, we can simulate, but it'll never be the same. Having that knowledge, it's akin to if you are maneuvering with an undisciplined multitude. You might promote Roger the Baker to a general, even though Roger the Baker has no real orderly skills, has no real skills of time management. This would be a Roger mistake. Roger that. So that's the same thing as employing the wrong type of story or the wrong type of character into the wrong plot, the wrong story itself. Where do you want the point of view, the psychic distance? These are all terms that they're simple terms that you can learn. By picking the wrong one or doing it poorly, you can really submarine a story. So finally, writer versus audience. While looking at the quote, maneuvering with an army is advantageous, with an undisciplined multitude most dangerous. Your audience, it's important to remember, I think. It is important to remember that your audience is the enemy. Your audience is always the enemy when you're a writer. And what that means is you're trying to win. However that takes place with something such as right here, American Psycho, you're trying to coerce your reader into paying attention to something they really don't want, to which they really don't want to be paying attention. You're trying to win. That is your enemy. The reader is your enemy. You have to drag them along by the scruff of their neck and make them read your novel. With other things, Lolita, for example. Lolita's job, the job of Humble Humbert in Lolita, is to coerce the situation to where you're following along. You're just following along. It's a much different reading experience, despite the fact that there's a lot of the same type of grotesque things going on. So you always have to look at the audience as your enemy, at least as far as I am concerned, upon whom we must enforce our will. We must crush our audience, see them driven before us, and hear the lamentations of their women. Eddie Izzard? Anyone? Eddie Izzard? Another Eddie Izzard quote? No? Okay, that's fine. No Eddie Izzard. Fans, except for me, I can accept that. A reader, how does this apply? How does this quote apply? A reader loves to be guided. We have to win by guiding our reader. This goes back to the difference between writing and storytelling. A lot of the things that you can take advantage of in storytelling, facial expressions, intonations, you can't do that on the page. You can do shades of that on the page, but it's very difficult. Very difficult. This is why George Saunders reads different than Ernest Hemingway. These types of intonations and inflections, the voice employed by the writer, those things are very difficult to really pull off. So we have to really guide in the way that orderliness helps. I know it is a bit condescending and irritating to a writer to say, just go ABC, paint by numbers. But in effect, a lot of what we're doing is just that. Later, we can screw things around. But it is only with that order that we can really make an effective story work. Another facet of this is in post. The disorderly, the undisciplined multitude of what it means to be a writer, that's dangerous. As far as, what do I mean by that? It is dangerous to just, I wrote a first draft, we're cool, we're gravy, right? It's all done, it's all out there, we're through here, we're finished. I wrote Finn at the bottom of the page, that story's done, baby, publish it. That is not maneuvering with an army. Maneuvering with an army is going back and saying, look, there's some good stuff here, but we've got to do a second draft. We got to do a final walkthrough. We got to do a spit shine. There's a lot of things we got to do. That is what it means to be maneuvering with an army as far as writing a story is concerned when you're talking about the writer versus the audience. The writer versus the audience, meaning that once you have redrafted and polished that story, you own the battlefield. You have all the soldiers in rank, you have them all in file, all in line, and you're calling the shots. That is, these are things that I think are important to remember when writing a story. That's why I have incorporated these into Writer's Quote 23 here on the channel. I've got a video up on my personal channel today as well. I will have videos 3 days a week here and on that channel, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You can find me on both channels. That is all I have for this video, and I hope to see you on Friday.